For 10 months of the year, stags live in bachelor groups, but for the remaining 2, they're in ferocious competition with one another, blinded by sex, supremacy, and their antlers. This is the rutting season. Preparing for the rutting season starts early. In spring, the stags grow new antlers, and by August, they're ready for fighting. It's brought on by a burst of testosterone, manipulated by the length of day, and it sparks some serious aggression and sexual characteristics unique to the deer. Now, looking good for the females isn't really a big deal here for the stags, but intimidating the other males, that's what they really strive for, so they alone can mate with all the hinds of the herd. Firstly, they wallow, and not in their own self-pity, rather their own urine and a little bit of mud. Apparently this makes them extra menacing to rival males. But they also bellow as loud as they can, and the stags actually pull their larynx, so their voice box, down to their sternum for maximum roaring impact. This is called a laryngeal descent, and actually male humans do it too. They pull their larynx down to make their voices deeper. So the better your roar is, the bigger you appear to be, and therefore more likely to win a fight with less injuries. The aim to secure mating rights with all the females of the herds mean the stags need to fight for the privilege, and they use their antlers. They lock them into place, pushing each other until the loser backs down. Now this can be dangerous and often result in bloody injuries, but what I want to know is how a stag avoids more serious damage. So we met up with Dr Ben Garrod, Evolutionary Biologist, to find out. Hi Ben!
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Beautiful morning.
I know, it's really cold though.
It's all right.
And I see you've bought some treats today.
I have, always.
What are these?
These are antlers from different species of deer you find in Britain.
Great, so what one's this?
It's quite a young male red deer.
So what is this antler made of?
We tend to think this is a bony structure, and it is bony, but it's not true bone. So if you looked at your skeleton, that's proper bone, that's true bone. This isn't quite the same sort of constituents in terms of ingredients. There's a little bit more cartilage, there's a little bit less bone, and the actual structure of the bony antler itself is different to what any bone in your body would be. So we call it a bone-like structure. Wow,
that's amazing. So, like when they're fighting, how do these things stay on their heads?
Good example.
Good example,
yeah,
I know.
Good, yeah.
That hurt as well.
Now that's important. It's because if you look at the end here, that's really rough and sharp, isn't it? It's a really rugged little structure there. Now, we find these loose. We find them sort of on the ground, they're fallen off, and it's really hard to imagine they're solidly attached to the rest of the skull. But if we look at this roe deer skull here. Now this was a big male roe deer, despite it being much smaller than this red. This was in his prime when he sadly died. But if you look, you can see they're absolutely solid.
They're completely fused to the skull, aren't they?
And these antlers grow from the skull. They don't suddenly become attached to the skull. They're not something that can easily fall off. Now this is how they grow, and this wonderful little skull here, you can see it's a continuation of the skull itself. So the actual antler grows from the skull. It doesn't grow separately to the skull, and it makes it very, very strong. It's only at the end of the rutting season, when the different hormones kick in, when the daylight causes this big change to occur, that you get this separation from the skull itself.
That's amazing. It just drops off.
Yeah. Yep.
Wow. So we've been watching the deers kind of locking their antlers together. How, like, you know, they're pushing, they're tugging against one another. How are they not getting like concussion or brain damage or a headache even?
Well, they might get headaches, so I'm not entirely sure whether they do or don't. But one of the important things to remember is most deer don't actually come to physical blows. A lot of it is display. So if you and I are both big male deer right now and we were kicking off, most of it would be, if you were bigger than me and had larger antlers than me, I wouldn't bother fighting.
Yeah.
So most of it isn't physical antler-to-antler contact.
Yeah.
But there's a really cool thing. Now I'm going to ask you something you probably wouldn't normally do. If you grab an antler in each hand,
In each hand?
Yeah, and try and gently separate it.
It's like pulling apart?
Together and wiggle it backwards and forwards.
Oh, that's so weird.
Can you feel the skull moving?
Yeah, it's like moving, yes.
Now, it's these little structures here, they're called sutures, and we have them on every skull. You've got them, I've got them, we've all got them, and it allows the different bones of the skull to be fused together. And in an adult, they should be really tightly fused like this. But you can see here...
I can even see it moving apart.
Exactly, it's a shock-absorbing adaptation that allows the cushioning of any blows that would be there. So the actual bones take the hit, rather than the soft structure, the brain and the nervous system underneath. So even the way the bones fuse or don't fuse helps them not get headaches.
Okay, so we've been watching the red deer using their antlers for sexual display and contest against one another.
Mm-hmm.
Have they always had antlers just for that purpose, or had they evolved them for a different means back in their history?
Oh, there's two really good questions there. And the first of all is, do they always have antlers? No. And if you keep hold of if you all have your red deer there, we'll do a quick who's who in the family tree of deer. At some point, so deer now have a big set of antlers, and it's nearly always the male, apart from the reindeer, that the females have it as well. And it's used for, as you say, sexual display, territoriality, physically fighting one another, and to attract females. But if you go back in the evolutionary tree for things like muntjac deer, they had the antlers. They also had little spaces where they had tiny little tusks.
Oh.
So
but they don't have them now.
Well, this one sadly dropped out. I didn't find the tusks. So if you look at that one, that's a combo with a two.
That's so small.
But if you keep going back, and things like this. Now this is a deer. It looks more like a vampire. This is a Chinese water deer. Now they are in the UK. Yes. They're absolutely beautiful, and this is a very old, sort of primitive species of deer. So it's things like this and the musk deer that have the tusks rather than the antlers. So the big males have these huge canines for display instead. So they've always used some sort of display techniques, and it started off as tusks, then we had tusks and little stubby little antlers, and then we got the big branching antlers, the big cool funky looking things for big display. So you can actually see the evolution of antlers throughout the ages of deer. But as far as we know, they've always been used almost exclusively for sexual display, for attracting the girls, for showing off to one another. But we don't know why things like caribou and reindeer have antlers in both sexes. Now there's lots of arguments. Some say it's a big a social thing between the sexes. They all have their own social ranking. Some say it's for cleaning the snow out of the way to get the ground. Probably not true. There's
I could just imagine them like...
Yeah, there's no evidence for it, but it sounds cool. As far as we know, they're almost exclusively used for some sort of sexual display.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much for bringing these along.
That's good fun.
Absolutely fascinating. Thanks.
No worries.
So the end of the rut is triggered by a drop in testosterone and other hormones, which means they'll cast off their antlers, and you can actually go out and find some. So if you do, make sure you send us some photos, tweet them in. Our handle is @BristolNatChan. And thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe for more videos like this.